Welcome to the Streets.mn podcast, the show where we highlight how transportation and land use can make our communities better places. Coming to you from an undisclosed, secure location in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I am your host, Ian R. Buck. Many of my favorite episodes are ones where we get to grab academic researchers and have nerdy conversations about their areas of expertise. So when hydrogeologist Greg Brick emailed us with a pitch about a groundwater heat island effect that he discovered under downtown Minneapolis, I was very excited to have him on the show. So let's dive in.
I'm a hydrogeologist. I worked for private environmental consulting firms. I taught in academia and laterally mapped springs in the state of Minnesota for the Department of Natural Resources.
And let's get into the springs thing just a little bit. So what was the goal of that project? Like why was the state interested in mapping all those springs?
Yeah, well, the state wasn't interested in mapping out the springs as a problem, and they got sued by Trout Unlimited some years ago for ignoring the natural resources of our state. And that was because springs are important in the natural environment as being trout habitat and habitat for rare plants like calcareous fens and so on. And these were, Trout Unlimited thought these were being ignored. And so when a certain amount of legacy funding became available, the state decided to put it towards mapping the state springs. Mm-hmm. I was a natural for that because I was the first one to systematically map the springs of the Twin Cities back in the 1990s as an undergraduate at the University of Minnesota. And I had written that up, and a classic article that became actually required reading in University of Minnesota hydro courses.
That's always a good feeling.
Yeah. So at that point, students are forced to read you. Therefore you are much more important. So,
or at least you're going to get that call, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I got the call, and for this spring mapping project, but it was for 4 years. Mm-hmm. There are thousands of springs in Minnesota, and I couldn't get to all of them, and I didn't. And everyone knew that. I said up front, I'm not going to be able to map every last spring in this state. And it was, apart from people, an assistant and some excellent technical help at the DNR, it was just me. Nice. I mean, it was just me against all the springs of the state. And so I had to it's not going to work just beating the bushes to find these like I had done in the 90s. I had to employ technology. And what I did was I found that there was a very characteristic signature of springs on LIDAR, which is one of the state coverages. And so everyone knows what radar is. And so just imagine radar, but with light, and light in a certain bandwidth. So we're dealing with lasers here, laser measuring, and
so this would be like aerial, so like an airplane flying overhead and shooting down LiDAR.
So everyone knows that the people on the ground should not point lasers at airplanes. That's a big no-no.
Yeah. And hopefully the airplanes don't point lasers at us.
But they're pointing them at us all the time is the problem. Okay. And so what this does gives us a coverage feature that is the landscape gets mapped with this laser light. Mm-hmm. And I found out after a while what it was about springs that was very distinctive. And this allowed me to save an immense amount of time.
Right, because what's the traditional way of finding a spring?
Yeah, beating the bushes. I had all kinds of weird suggestions. Some of them make sense, but they weren't real, but they didn't work, as I found. Mm-hmm. One of them was that infrared cameras, because springs come out in winter, especially the water is
a lot warmer than its surroundings.
Warmer than its surroundings. And that really gives a strong signal in infrared. So that part is true. But the problem with it, I got a very fancy infrared FLIR cameras are called, and went around, and I immediately found that this ain't gonna work because you get great images of springs with this camera, but there are so many distracting elements in the field of view that you have to be pretty much right up at the rock outcrop to see the spring.
And at that point, you can just see it.
Yeah, and then you can just, so it defeats the purpose. So it's why bother?
Okay.
So that wasn't going to work. And so finally I hit upon LiDAR, and this was an enormous savings because I was looking at going around to each individual state park in Minnesota, beating the bushes for the springs. And then it's like, lo and behold, on LiDAR, I can see them.
Were you just doing stuff on public land, or were you also trying to map stuff?
See, public land was prioritized. And the idea was if there are private landowners that would readily let me on their land, and I did those too. Yes, I threw those in. I had priorities, and the first one was to map the state lands because they're the easiest. I have the access.
Right.
And then theoretically, once those were completely and totally mapped, and they never were just because of the limits of the funding, then I could do the private land in the Minnesota River Valley. It's really, what you have to do is you have to mail letters to all these people that live, like, let's just say you detect an area and there's some really good springs in there because you can see them from the highway and you want to go in and map them. You got to send letters to all those, find out who they are, send letters, and then they got to respond. The response rate is not great because people do not want to cooperate with the DNR frequently, I think, because I kind of understand
I'm imagining if I received like an email that said like, hey, we found a spring on your, like, do you want to come? And I'm like, that sounds like a phishing attempt to me,
Well, it could be. Well, even if you think even if you see the official letterhead, you don't, you think it's, it is a DNR, that's terrifying too, because what did I do wrong?
Right.
Why are these people, and if they come on my land, what other things are they going to see that maybe they'll see something, I'm going to get written up for something else. That
little did they know that they were just going to get this nerd who wanted to come and check out a spring.
No, I got all kinds of interesting questions from the public as I was. People would ask me like about burn permits and fishing regulations. I have no idea what to tell you.
People get so scared of the government, but like when you meet and you chat with like public servants, you're like, wow, it's a bunch of nerds. They're really passionate about the thing that they have been hired to do. And like that is their area of focus. I love people who work in the public sector.
Yeah, like Eco Waters. See, I was with the Eco Waters division. If you want to get scared, maybe it would be like some of the enforcement division. Then it's like, uh-oh. But no, I was just harmless.
Yep. The springs, of course, is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about some underwater, groundwater warming phenomena that you discovered here in the Twin Cities. You discovered this after the spring project?
No, this was actually before.
Oh, okay. So walk us through like what is this groundwater warming phenomenon? How did you discover it? Like what are we talking about here? Yeah,
so it's easy to begin with Joseph Nicolet.
Okay.
He's a French scientist who came here in the 1800s, and
Nicolet Avenue is named after.
Nicolet. Good. Yep. Nicolet Mall, Nicolet Island are named after him, and he was a very precise person. And when he came across large springs, he would measure their temperatures very exactly. So we owe to him the earliest good measurements of groundwater temperature in the state of Minnesota. And in particular, the one he measured that's relevant here is Coldwater Spring.
Okay.
This is a huge spring flowing about 60 gallons per minute down at the VA, approximately down by the VA hospital. But the National Park Service has now made it the Coldwater Unit, and because of its historic significance. So anyways, he measured the temperature of this spring in 1836 as being at 46 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
And this is an important number because it is the baseline temperature for what groundwater should be at this latitude. So groundwater temperature varies usually according to latitude. So
But it
away
remains consistent across no matter what time of year it is.
Yeah, exactly. So as you move further away from the equator, and we're 45 degrees north of the equator, the groundwater in the Twin Cities area, winter or summer, should be about 46 degrees Fahrenheit.
Pretty easy to remember since 45, 46. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly, yeah. When I went around measuring the temperature at thousands of springs in the state, they were all about that. Mm-hmm. The ones in the metro I noticed, however, and all this data is online. The Minnesota Spring, if you just go to the DNR website and look for Minnesota Spring inventory, you'll pull up a map with all of these blue dots, and then you can click on one of those blue dots and it'll bring up the information on that. And that's information that basically I collect over the course of years. The springs in the metro up and down through the river gorge are elevated in temperature. Mm-hmm. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees Fahrenheit above what they should be. An undergraduate at the University of Minnesota did an intense research project at Coldwater Spring, where Nicola had originally measured his temperature. It was a multiple-year project, and she found that the temperature of Coldwater Spring nowadays is elevated by several degrees above what it should be, and it doesn't even approach 46 degrees Fahrenheit anymore. It's well above that.
Which, well, a few degrees, if I don't have the background thinking about spring water temperatures, right? Like a few degrees Fahrenheit doesn't sound like a huge difference, but I also know that when we're talking about global climate change, right, the entire world going 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels is like a huge deal. Where on the scale from like not at all important to this is going to be very, very bad for the human species are we talking? How concerned should we be about a few degrees Fahrenheit in spring water temperature?
Well, I'll get to that when I talk about I talk about the Sheik's Cave.
Yeah.
But here, even a few degrees here can be disastrous because trout depend on. Trout are very finicky. They are what we call stenothermal. They can only take a narrow temperature range in there. Mm-hmm. And so trout habitat is very locked into having cold. Well, in winter, it seems very warm, and in summer, it seems very cold to us, compared with the ambient temperatures. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of what Trout Unlimited was getting at with this lawsuit. It's like, you need to, hey, DNR,
we need data to know what we don't know.
We need data about this.
Right.
And so I did a lot of work on the springs of the North Shore and measuring the temperatures up there. So to get to your question, for humans, a few degrees Fahrenheit with our springs, that's not going to, unless you're a fisherman, mm-hmm. that's not going to impact you. But something else will.
So trout, if they have such a narrow band of temperatures that they can handle, what's the phrase for that in an ecosystem that like they're like the canary in the coal mine,
yes,
right? Like
yes.
if that species goes, then you know that you're starting to have a problem, right?
In coming decades, Minnesota is going to have a huge problem with trout. I mean, that's mm-hmm. basically, you're going to have to go up. If they'll let us across the Canadian border anymore, you're going to have to. Go up to Lake Nipigon and, places like that to get the really good trout fishing. Mm-hmm. Because it's, this warmer and drier trend, and the fisheries on the North Shore, they're very concerned about this. Even a few degrees is going to be catastrophic for the habitat up there. Mm-hmm. I'm really cued in on, having measured the temperatures of thousands of springs, I'm really cued in to, what they should be. Yeah. If anyone knows what a spring temperature should be, it's probably me. I mean, and several of my colleagues at the DNR and a few more people, they're really like, hey, this is what looks normal to us. So that's why it came as an immense shock when I measured the groundwater at a spring under the city of Minneapolis, under the downtown area, in a cave 75 feet below street level. And
okay, now so that's a story right there.
Yeah.
Oh
yes,
we can't just skate by that. Like how does one even get into a cave that's 75 feet below downtown Minneapolis?
Yeah, so this cave is well known. It was discovered in 1904. Mm-hmm. And it's had various names over the years. It's been called the Farmers and Mechanics Bank Cave. It's been called the Manhole Cave. And latterly, Sheik's Cave, because it was under the Sheik's Gentlemen's Club.
Yes, which is not there anymore.
Yes.
I had to go and do some research to figure out who had bought it since then, and I don't remember what that business is named now, but I'll put that information in the show notes. But the manhole that I saw a picture of you standing in front of this manhole, and it's like right there at is it like Washington and like Fifth Avenue kind of area?
It's on 4th Street South.
Okay.
Yeah, and like 2nd Avenue.
There you go. Yeah. So the heart of downtown.
Yeah. So it's the old Farmers and Mechanics Bank. It looks like a Greek temple. That's still there. That in itself is another story, because this cave being discovered under the bank, it gave them the sort of the EBGBs. Yeah, I see it there on your screen.
Yeah, and actually, it looks like they've repaved the street,
yes.
so that like hexagonal manhole is no longer there next to the downtown cabaret. That's the business that's currently there.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Greek temple is still there as a downtown cabaret, but they were immensely concerned that people would dig up from the vaults, from the cave into the treasure vaults of the bank. From what I've said, I wouldn't be at all worried. It's quite some distance. As I said, it's 75 feet below street level. You'd have a lot of digging to do to get from that cave upward
this is why you're not the main character in a heist movie, because you're not willing to try.
Yeah, I suppose.
So anyway, so we've got this cave.
Yes.
Underground, deep underground. Has been how extensively was it explored back in the day?
Oh, very well. They mapped it out. Mm-hmm. It was mapped out in 1929. It was mapped in when they discovered it in 1904, and then again in 1929 they did a really good survey. And they had to do this because they installed a bunch of piers in the cave to hold the ceiling of the cave up, because they were concerned. They were building heavier and heavier buildings.
Right.
They were concerned that this is gonna collapse the cave. And a genuine concern.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if someday like a giant sinkhole began to form around that part of downtown Minneapolis, because those piers are no longer, that was one of my discoveries, is that those piers are no longer supporting the ceiling of the cave. The piers have themselves
like settled
and left a gap on top. So they're not in connection with the ceiling. See, they're not. So there's quite a few of these piers, but they're not supporting the ceiling like they.
Okay, so somebody will have to take a look at that in the future.
They rarely go down there, though.
But again, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the water.
Yeah, so eventually I was able to walk through the storm drains to this cave in the 1990s. And nowadays that sounds horrific, and you would probably be arrested for something like that. But the mindset was very different before 9/11. You had to realize. And when I went to the Minneapolis Sewer Department to get maps for these caves, they gave me the maps. They were very encouraging, and it's an attitude that's unthinkable nowadays. They would never. They would never give you those maps now.
Sure.
You would be ushered out the door and
liability is a hell of a drug.
It is. They tell you to scram. There's no way they. But anyways, it was different back then. I was able to get into the cave with friends and so on. It's not a trip you want to make yourself, and it took about 2 hours starting at the riverbanks to from what's now Mill Ruins Park. It was before was Mill Ruins Park, and we made our way to the cave, and I was able to get temperature met with a precision thermometer. And I was just absolutely shocked that the temperature of the groundwater in there was 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So the normal, what it should be, if there's no impacts, if it's just normal ambient groundwater, it should be 46 degrees, and it was 66 degrees. I've never seen anything. I've never seen, in all my years as an environmental consultant, in academia, and with the DNR, I've never seen, like a thermal anomaly that great.
And that can't be explained just by the difference in like all of the springs that we've been measuring have been right at the surface. So that's where the groundwater is coming out. 75 feet down, it's not possible for it to be like 20 degrees, like for that to be normal. Like how many?
It just can't.
Like how many other caves 75 feet down have you measured?
No. I've in my years as a caver, I have explored plenty of caves in southeastern Minnesota, natural caves, Mystery Cave, Niagara Cave, which is named after its waterfall. They don't have.
They're pretty similar to the
normal expected temperature. Okay. They don't have So this is really an oddball thing. And when I read the original reports, they indicated, in addition to Nicolet's baseline data from 1836. There is a report from 1907 talking about this cave where they indicate that the water is icy cold. So, and again, it's in that 40 degree. Yeah. So it was a century from 1907 to 2007. That was the time of my last trip down there. It had warmed 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And so when I went back to the cave, I made multiple trips down there. So I discovered that immensely warmed groundwater on one trip. And then I decided to do a more systematic survey of the underbelly of Minneapolis, wherever I could find drip waters or seepage waters in tunnels or in caves down there. And what I found was that as you move away from the surface, the cave is above the tunnel system, the main storm drain system. All the springs in that old tunnel system were, and by that I mean places where groundwater was oozing or shooting in some cases through the wall, through the cracked lining of the sewer tunnel. That groundwater was just a few degrees of the expected above the what it should be. So I'm trying to say here is that the groundwater is warmest near the surface, up near where the cave, at the cave. As you go deeper from the cave downwards, it gets cooler down more towards what the expected value is. And this actually fits the modeling done by the St. Anthony Falls Hydraulic Laboratory, which is associated with the University of Minnesota. They did a theoretical study, and they didn't know about any of my data or any of my work, or had no idea who I was or anything like that. So completely cut off from knowing about anything that I'm doing. They did a modeling study, and the question was asked, how much would groundwater under the Twin Cities warm under a climate change scenario with global warming due to the urban heat island effect and so on? And they determined that it would be about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I saw that value, I just had to laugh. Real value, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So they were way off. But the thing is, they had pretty much nailed the temperature of the springs in the river gorge. Those are elevated about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So they were right. Their predictions were exactly right about the springs in the Mississippi River Gorge. But under the downtown area, it's way off. It's the temperature is much elevated. And as I just mentioned, this is due to an urban heat island effect. The pavement...
sounds like it's much more like concentrated than the urban heat island effect that we think of for air temperature, right? Where like metro-wide in the Twin Cities, you're a few degrees warmer than the rural areas surrounding us.
Yeah, so everyone is familiar, has kind of like an intuitive sense of what an urban heat island effect is. You know, you drive into the city on a hot summer day and it's like, ugh. You know, the heat on the pavement, and it's just like, you know, you could fry an egg on the pavement. It's so hot. That's what I'm talking about here. That heat is conducted downwards through the pavement into the underlying groundwater. The same thing with buildings. You know, you have what do you have in winter? You know, you have boilers running and all this kind of water leakage and stuff. It leaks off into a sump, and then where does it go? All that is kind of heating up with the groundwater under the city. And that fits the model of what I found in that the warmest temperatures, you know, the 20 degree that 20 degree excursion above normal, that's kind of in the top part of the strata. And as you go deeper and deeper down under that, it gets cooler and cooler. And that exactly kind of matches that model that this is due to an urban heat island effect. And so it all kind of comes together at that point.
So if it is concentrated in a relatively small area, is this something that we need to worry about from an environmental perspective? I don't think anybody's really thinking about like the wild ecosystem of downtown Minneapolis, right? So like what is the negative effects that we're looking at from this?
Yeah, so that they are potentially quite serious. Now, as I mentioned, that just that minimal amount of warming with the springs in the metro area, that's going to impact, you know, plant and animal habitat. And just for the record, yes, we do have a trout spring in the Twin Cities down at the Mall of America at Ike's Creek. You wouldn't know it, but just practically in the shadows of the Mall of America, there is a very pristine...
Is that natural preserve area?
It's down by
hiking?
The Bass Ponds, down there in Bloomington, and very nice. And it is a DNR, you know, recognized trout stream. So we do have them.
So like the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge area.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I advise, you know, anyone who wants like a nice thing to do, you know, summer or winter, go down there and have a look at that. Oh,
look, Bass Ponds Trail is marked on Google Maps here. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can go down there and have a look for yourself at the only genuine trout stream in the metro area. So the minimal warming that we get from the urban heat island effect at the edges, that's causing could potentially cause problems here, like at Ike's Creek and so on. But the big danger with this huge warming under the city itself, the one that I detected, is that there are plenty of studies that it's a very well documented that in climate warming scenarios, that waterborne illnesses spike. The warmer the water is, things like cholera, which fortunately we don't have that here right now. Cholera, typhoid, we have had some of the springs in the Minnesota River Gorge people have come down with typhoid from drinking at them if they're unfiltered. Diarrheal diseases, especially gastrointestinal ailments, that sort of little thing where you're just vomiting and not feeling well for a few days, that kind of thing. Those diarrheal ailments, especially, all those are promoted by warming waters. And I was corresponding with someone at the Minnesota Department of Health, Pat Serafolian, and he was saying that the engineers have known for years that the groundwater under the cities is, it's quite contaminated with sewage bacteria. And there's not much we can do about it because even with, perfect house connections, perfect building connections and everything, it's just, it's just going to leak out. That stuff's, there's just going to be little leaks here and there. And these
leaks into the tap water, you're saying?
No, into the groundwater.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So there's going to be like where a house or building connection is like a few drops here. But that is enough to, inoculate the groundwater under our cities. And with these warming temperatures, that is, there's the food material, the oxygen, so on. They are going to multiply down there. Okay, that's no big deal to us. It's no skin off our back until you have a water main break. And we get those here in Minneapolis. We get several of those per, I think, usually in the winter. And some other cities who have a lot of older infrastructure, like Jackson, Mississippi. I mean, their water mains are popping like firecrackers on the 4th of July. During a water main break, you get something called back siphonage. And that is that as soon as you lose that pressure in a force main, and it creates a void in there, it sucks in the ambient water. And that's why
and the water main is, you're talking the water that is going to our homes and businesses, right? So that is the tap water.
Yeah, so it will get into the distribution system, and that's why they issue boil water alerts after a water main break in Minneapolis, because and some of these boil water, fortunately not here, but I know like the ones in Jackson, Mississippi, or as a case I've studied, some of these boil water. I mean, you have to be boiling your water all summer. I mean, because it's because it's just one after another incident like this. So this tells us that, replacing old infrastructure, I guess I've just given them a new reason to replace old infrastructure.
Sure.
Because, I gave this as a talk at the American Water Works Association meeting in Duluth. And there's a lot of people from the Minneapolis, waterworks up there.
Yeah.
And that was one of the messages I want to convey is that a lot of times you'll have these outbreaks of these sudden outbreaks of diarrheal illnesses, and it's like no one can seem to really pin into anything. It's kind of like, it was this, or it's like it was exactly that lunch counter, or and what I'm trying to point out is this may account for some of those things.
Are you trying to be the Jon Snow of Minnesota?
Yeah, basically, yeah. No, your references, they're. Did you read that book? That the book about? Well, there's been many books about Jon Snow. But.
Yeah, I don't remember what classes he's come up in, but the story of how he figured out that like the well water was the source of it's well known.
His famous phrase was "Take the handle off the Broad Street pump, and the cholera epidemic will end." And that's pretty much what happened. And interestingly enough, at the time he said that was like years and years before the cholera bacillus had been discovered.
Right. Yeah.
So it was just a statistical thing. It's like there's something wrong here, and so that's kind of what I'm saying. Now, I am not an epidemiologist. I filed a data request with the Department of Health to get the old information about diarrheal illnesses and outbreaks in the city of Minneapolis. I wanted maybe see if I could do that same Broad Street pump Jon Snow gig thing. And they said, no. You got to go to, Minneapolis Health. I went to them. And I don't know if you filed data requests or not.
I try to avoid that kind of frustration in my life,
Yeah, you nailed it. It's a frustration because of all the data requests that I filed, both the city of St. Paul, Minneapolis, about various things, it always turns up like with kind of like a shrug of the shoulders. It's like, that's kind of scattered. We don't really know. And that's what they said here. They said, well, it's probably off in a lot of paper records, and sorry, we can't help you. And I didn't pursue it any further there. It's like, this is a perfect project where, for a graduate student, put a data logger down under the city of Minneapolis at these springs, so you can get continuous data over a long stretch of time to see what that groundwater temperature is. It fluctuating with the seasons or not? And then, for an epidemiology student to, look at those clusters, look at the statistics. See, can you find disease clusters in there? I know that, that's a very contentious thing. And I know somebody was really bugging me about that. Like, you got to get that data and stuff. And I just point, even in the case of well-known disease clusters, like Love Canal and New York State and stuff, or nearer to home, like the St. Louis Riley Tar cancer cluster from years ago.
Where was that?
In the Riley Tar Superfund site in St. Louis Park.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now I'm probably dating myself by even mentioning that case. But that was a big one to study in school. Oh, Riley Tar, But even with that, as soon as you identify what you think is it's going to be disputed immediately. Somebody's going to say, no, you don't have the right error bars on that, and all, and so I'm not really the right.
Because they don't want to be liable. Right.
Yeah. So they're gonna like fault it in every which way they can. So whether I came up with a small amount of data or a huge amount of data, I need an epidemiologist to really help me, because I'm a geologist by training. I'm the one who discovered the cause of this. That should be good enough. Somebody else has got to help me out with it. The other part of it.
You've been talking mostly about like concerns with what happens when groundwater gets into water mains, into our tap water supply. Is there a concern that like these kinds of waterborne bacteria and other pathogens, is that going to eventually make it unsafe to go swimming in like the lakes or the river or anything like that?
Yeah, I think you can even narrow it down more than that. There is a definite concern about that, about surface water, because especially, let's just look at a scenario. You have one of these big springs spewing out sewage bacteria. And where does that go? It's going to drain into surface water at some point. A lot of the springs that we have in the Mississippi River Gorge, they go into the Mississippi River.
Right.
So if we're having a problem, if the aquifer under the city of Minneapolis is just a giant fermentation vessel, which is kind of what I'm claiming it is, that ultimately, and as that drains away, that's going to get into that's going to end up in the Mississippi River, a lot of that. But there's a more immediate danger even than swimmers. And this is something I've pointed out too, is that there are a lot of people who believe in raw water. The virtues of drinking raw water, drinking, just spring water, right from the rock face, and they will collect it and drink it, and it's got these sewage bacteria in there.
These people have clearly never had Giardia.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't drink from these springs. I mean, I've gone all over this. There are springs I would drink from, yes, but there are certainly none of the ones in the metro here. And yet there are people who collect the spring water from the springs in the gorge, and I know it because I've seen them doing it, or you'll see like the discarded 1-gallon plastic jugs laying there. You'll know, oh, okay, somebody was collecting water here. Kennedy at the federal government will now begin to praise these. The virtues of raw water. I'm not sure, but it's not something I would mess with. So that would be my concern. Like I said, there are documented cases where people have gotten typhoid fever from drinking from the springs in the Twin Cities area. There was a St. Paul spring. There's like a newspaper article about it, and these kids were drinking there. Oh, this good, cool, delicious water. And it's like, nope.
So you've mentioned Minneapolis is, where you have collected a fair amount of data about the 75 feet down groundwater temperatures. You've mentioned Jackson, Mississippi, Maine. Are there projects in multiple places where you have taken data from? Like, do we know if this is a phenomenon that is repeating across different metro areas?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, so the whole subject of what are called subsurface urban heat islands. So an urban heat island is the one that the hot pavements in summer and that sort of thing. A subsurface urban heat island, that's when it, as I explained how that happens, how the buildings and the pavements will heat up the groundwater underneath. Mm-hmm. And so create like a whole heat island underneath the city in the groundwater. That is a phenomenon that is well documented worldwide, especially in Europe and Asia.
Okay.
There are researchers. In fact, when I wrote a peer-reviewed article on this topic, on the Minneapolis heat island, there was no one around here who could review it because there's no expertise in the subject. There were some English-speaking German scientists who were able to review it for me and make suggestions. Look into this, and the typical editorial suggestions for improving the article. But that just tells you, in the United States in particular, it's just not a well-recognized thing. Certainly not in Minnesota. This is the first research I've done. This is the first recognition of one of these heat islands in the state of Minnesota. And it's a huge one, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not... I know there was a study done, like a small groundwater anomaly under the city of Winnipeg, like in Canada in the 1970s, but it is nothing compared to this. I mean, this is like a really robust bathwater kind of thing that's going on under our feet.
If you're taking baths in 66-degree water,
no, that's true. No, that's that's a little too chilly for a bath.
That's too Minnesota for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this is a well-known phenomenon by scientists in Europe and in Asia, like, what are those communities doing in response to this kind of thing? Like, are there mitigation efforts that are being put into place, or what do you think we should be doing?
So, first of all, what they're doing under some of the German cities where these researchers are working, they have entire observation well networks that are set up specifically to collect that data, the groundwater temperature. Now, we have plenty of groundwater wells, of water wells under the city of Minneapolis, but guess what? None of them are useful for this purpose. That was one of my first findings. I was looking for data for this project.
Is that because they're all at the 5-degree elevated level?
It's because where's the good water? It's really deep. And so all these wells are screened at 500 or 1,000 feet. That's totally below the thermal heat. It's way below. It's in different layer. It's separated by multiple layers from the layers I was looking at the top. And it's way down there. And so that water at the bottom, that water is 46 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's like, what's the problem? Well, there are very, very, very few wells that are screened in the proper interval, because if you did screen a water well in the interval that I'm talking about under the city of Minneapolis, you'd get nothing but contaminated water. It would have PAHs in it, high chloride. It'd have all kinds of contaminants in it.
Yeah.
And what they don't know is it would also be warm. It would also be quite warm. We're not getting that data because of that.
By the way, when you're exploring in a cave, how do you keep track of how far under the surface you are? How do you even know that?
Only don't know this because there's the manhole on 4th Street South goes right down to the cave. And
So that's pretty easy to measure.
That's measured. Yeah, that's on sewer documents. So that's known that's, how deep that is. So that's a real, that's an easy one. If you're in one of the natural caves in southeastern Minnesota, it can be tricky to know how far. You got to do survey from the start at the entrance where you have a known elevation survey and up, down.
Right.
So
sounds like a lot of trigonometry.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you did do all that kind of thing. But here it's real easy because it's all very cut and dried.
Right.
But okay.
So anyway, so we don't have monitoring stations for keeping track of that.
We don't have a lot of data. I couldn't even contour my data, and that was the frustrating part. Because I had a modeler in Europe, one of those.
Is contouring, is that a statistical analysis?
Contouring like the concentrations on the water table, where
okay, when you're mapping it out.
Yeah. So when I began as a puppy or a grunt or whatever you want, whatever they're called nowadays, at an environmental firm years ago, my first job out of college, and you make your way to that cubicle and get to work. The company I was working, it's called Delta Environmental, and they had a big contract with Amoco Petroleum.
Oh wow! Okay.
To
RIP.
Yeah, the BP. Yeah, they're now Amoco BP. So
right.
But we had this big contract to study the leaking underground storage tanks. And one of the first things you learn is you got to have enough data to contour your site.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know, okay, is the concentration of benzene going up or down here? You got to have enough points.
Right.
I don't, even with my surveys and stuff, I have such a limited amount of data. I couldn't even I could draw contour lines for the cave and the immediate vicinity, but that was it. Mm-hmm. So presumably this thermal anomaly runs all the way out under Nicollet Mall and under quite a large area, several square miles. And it would be nice to get that kind of data.
Mm-hmm.
That would, and we could see what kind of beast that we're dealing with here. And as far as what we can do in the interim, again, I think Minneapolis they've had a good emphasis on replacing old infrastructure. They realize that some of these old water mains in the 1800s, they realize it's a problem. When the groundwater warms, it causes problems inside and outside the pipes, because inside the pipe, if you have a water main break, all those sewage bacteria get sucked into the distribution system, and then everyone has to do a boil of water to render it safe. But also, when the groundwater that's bathing the pipes is physically warmer too, mm-hmm. there's a lot more corrosion going on, so the pipes are going to degrade faster mm-hmm. in that warmer water. See, it's like a double whammy there. Better building and house connections. And replacing old infrastructure, those are the kind of things you can do up front. Would a large scale implementing geothermal heating in downtown Minneapolis, would that help to suck the heat out of the ground? Yeah, that's a funny story because as I mentioned, in This phenomenon is much better studied in Europe. And the groundwater, for example, under the city of Istanbul in mm-hmm. Turkey mm-hmm. is quite elevated.
Large city, yeah.
And what they've done is, you give them the lemons and they, they make the lemonade in sense that they're using it for geothermal heating.
Okay.
So what I thought, in all my simplicity is, the groundwater nerd, I thought, well, hey, maybe that's just what you suggested there. So I decided to call Excel Energy. I wasn't just going to call the front desk, mind you. I don't find an engineer there, somebody who knew something.
Yeah.
Oh, he was scathing. It was like, when I said, "Hey, did you know I tried to explain, I sent them my copies of my studies, and there's, potentially a large untapped source of heat here." And it's like, thank you very much. And that was it. They would not, that was it. They wouldn't talk to me any further. I suppose they have people calling them all the time with perpetual motion machine ideas and stuff. And
I mean, this isn't like a crazy idea. There's, there are, community scale geothermal projects going in like the Prospect Park neighborhood. And those are all new builds. So like, that's why they're able to implement them like right now. But,
like I said, I tried to bring some engineers in on this and get their opinion, and they just wouldn't even talk to me about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping by, talking to you and, to alert people to this whole issue, that's like outbreaks of diarrheal illness that are unexplained. Well, maybe we've had this explanation for some years. We just, we need to look at this issue. Or in the case, hey, could we use this for geothermal heat? But like, do something here.
Right.
So
call your city council members, I guess, and ask for something.
Yeah, could you please warm me geothermally here? I mean, could you?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think that putting in data collection, like that's infrastructure, would be the first step, right?
It is absolutely. Yeah, you don't even want to do like a geothermal pilot project actually, unless you've actually done a study to figure out, okay, here's kind of like the edges of the warm, this really warm area. This is how much we'd have to recoup in thermal terms, in terms of BTUs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And is this practical? And until we've done that kind of study, we're not even at the point of looking at geothermal extraction of it.
Well, I'm a fan of data, and so I would love to see this kind of thing studied more. Yeah,
I wish I were like, if I were like at the beginning of my career and I knew this ahead of time, knew about this, that's what I would try to get a grant. Mm-hmm. Supposing that the National Science Foundation isn't eliminated in the next few days. A
lot of these things are probably going to be up to the states. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, it sounds like this is probably something that's worth taking a look at in our major metro areas in Minnesota, so having a state level grant to allow cities, because we want to know, is this not just Minneapolis, or is this happening under the downtown areas of Duluth, Rochester, St. Paul, St. Cloud, right?
Yeah, this would be a great thing for legacy funding.
Well, I know that we do have a number of university students who listen to this podcast. So if anybody feels inspired to go and do some data collection,
to me. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. I mean, on just in Sheik's Cave alone, I can tell you that right there would be a worthy dissertation topic, and an important one. Just to install data loggers down there and get a really good time series. It's a lengthening time of PhDs. You might get 6, maybe 8 years. God forbid, 8 years of data, but at least several years worth of data, enough so you start to see the seasonal trends that we see at these other big springs. Mm-hmm. And I believe I was starting to see, with the little data I collected, I was starting to see pieces of those seasonal trends in there, in the data for the groundwater under Minneapolis. It's just a fascinating subject. And there might not be a Nobel Prize in it, but certainly to me, I mean, from everything I know, it'd be a very important study to make.
Well, Greg, we're just about at an hour's mark. Are there any other final thoughts that you had on the topic?
As far as I can tell, basically, our cities are sitting on the top of these aquifers that are just basically fermentation vessels of sewage and groundwater warmed by the urban heat island effect. And I think, especially here in the United States, we should know a lot more about that. Temperature measurements are cheap. You can do them for like if you want to go measure PFAS, parts per trillion, those are expensive lab assays. Temperature is almost free for the taking. And why not go out there and collect that data?
Right.
Whether it's, to protect the public or to make use of it, for a geothermal project, what have you.
Are we literally the frogs sitting and gradually heating up water?
Yeah, it's only that area of warmth is only going to expand. As time goes on, and again, expand in 3 dimensions. It's going to go further out. I would guess it extends that heat island of the heated groundwater extends well beyond Nicollet Mall, the intensely heated water. And as far as the mildly elevated, that you're seeing that way out in the suburbs. You're seeing that already way out in the, quite just distant from the core.
Yeah. I mean, not nice, but
it is a fascinating problem though. And you can, even if you're into the mathematics, I know people would just really get into the mathematics of heat conduction and Fourier series and all this stuff, looking at this and thermal conduction. And, for a physicist, even there's a lot of stuff to look at in there. And, but for me, it's just the wonder of these eye-popping groundwater temperatures that I just have never seen anywhere else in the state. And if there's one person who should know what the groundwater temperature should be, it's me, given how many thousands of springs I've measured.
Yeah. Well, we've got our work cut out for us, I suppose. So, yeah, Greg, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Streets.mn podcast. Okay, about the whole undisclosed location thing. Yes, I am moving again, and if you want to know more about how I chose my new neighborhood and how I moved all of my furniture by bike, I'm working on a couple of non-podcast posts that will appear on Streets.mn in the near future, so keep an eye on the website. This show is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Non-Derivative license, so feel free to republish the episode as long as you are not altering it and you are not profiting from it. The music in this episode is by Eric Brandt and the Urban Hillbilly Quartet. This episode was edited by Sherry Johnson, hosted by me, Ian R. Buck, and was transcribed by Stina Neel. We're always looking to feature new voices on the Streets.mn podcast, so if you have ideas for future episodes, drop us a line at podcast@streets.mn. Streets.mn is a community blog and podcast and relies on contributions from audience members like you. If you can make a one-time or recurring donation, you can find more information about doing so at streets.mn/donate. Find other listeners and discuss this episode on your favorite social media platform using the hashtag StreetsMNPodcast. Until next time, take care.